Hey, what's up YouTube? This is our 3-part series on the death of a loved one. Part 1 was the preparations prior to your loved one dying. This is part 2. This is based on the procedures that you have to take once you are told your loved one is going to die. And part 3 will be based on the fact that your loved one has died. So what has to be taken after that? The coffin purchase, the urn purchases, if the person is being cremated, all of the things that are going to be needed after you are told that, or after your loved one has died. So this is a 3-part series. We may do part 4 in case we come across some new information. So thank you for watching our video. Okay, good morning. Okay, now this is an interviewed video, and I have questions for you concerning the procedures for when your loved one is going to die. You have been told that your loved one is going to die. So the first question I have here is setup. So explain to us what setup is all about.
Okay, the setup after you're told that your loved one is going to die is for hospice. The doctor will tell you that they're going to send your loved one either back home or they're going to send them to the nursing home. Hospice setup for the nursing home, of course, once that person is going to die, we'll set that up for you. Hospice will also, the nursing home will also send someone to you from hospice and talk to you about the procedures.
Okay. Next step is notify. And this specifically says notifying your family members.
Yes. Once you're told that your loved one is going to die, you need to notify all your family members so they can spend time with their loved one before they pass away.
Okay, and next it says, the next question is, have a written obituary.
Yes, you want to have a written obituary because you want to make sure you capture your loved one's life when they lived their life during that time. You may also want to have a collage such as pictures of that loved one. And also, you can do one or two things. You can either have the obituary done professionally, or you can do it yourself online, where you can download a program. It's not that expensive, for like $29.95, depending on what state you're in, and that's inexpensive, and you can do the obituary yourself.
The next question is the notification. What's behind that?
The notification is once you're aware that your loved one is going to pass away, you want to notify the cemetery. If the person already has a burial plot, you want to make sure they know about it and they're aware. And once they're aware of it, you will make the decision on whether you're going to bury your loved one or you're going to do a cremation. The processes are going to be different from state to state, so you just want to make sure that they are aware of that person so they can set things in motion.
Next question is the will.
The will is something that you want to make sure you have your hands on. You're going to be asked for that because we'll talk about that after the fact, which will be the third part. You want to make sure you have the will. You want to make sure you have any legal documents, and you want to make sure that all this paperwork is at hand and easily accessible, so you'll know what to do and what your loved one's wishes were.
And also what comes to my mind is that you want to have these documents in hand and ready before the loved one dies, because you're kind of on time constraints, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And also you want to make sure that the will is updated, because if the will is not updated, if the person has someone who has already died and they on that will first, that will needs to be changed. Unfortunately, if your loved one is not coherent at that time, it's going to be impossible for them to change it. So a will should be reviewed and looked at on a regular basis with your loved one before they even get to the state of dying.
Also, I would like to mention is that wills are kind of expensive to have made, and there may be some inexpensive alternatives, but what price ranges do you know about?
I do know that wills are expensive, and again, I like to reiterate that it's from state to state. I checked on having a will done myself. It was a $500 fee. However, you can go to Office Depot, or you could go online to Amazon and order a will kit, which is very inexpensive. It costs somewhere between $9 to $10 depending on your state. And what you can do is have that, once you have the information written up, you go to a notary, get it notarized, and it makes it a legal document.
Okay, thank you. Next, funds.
So funds, did your loved one leave monies for you to pay for their burial or cremation? This can be very complicated if they did not. If they have not left any funds for the will, then you as the loved one is going to have to make the decision. Who's going to pay for this? Do you have siblings? Do you have other people can help pay for this will? And there are other things you can do also, which we would get into later on as far as taking care of that, either the burial or cremation.
Okay, and I have a question, and some of this we did touch on a little last week, or last video, and I just want to touch on a little bit because of more details. Now, with the funds aspect, the funding is appropriate to know, because even if your loved one has insurance, the insurance money does not kick in until long after the loved one has already died. So the money needs to be present up front, correct?
Well, to a degree. Some insurances will pay for it. However, if you don't know how much insurance that person has, then it's going to kick in later. There are some insurances that you can notify them in advance and let them know that your loved one has died. What they'll do is they'll check and see how much funds they have on hand for that individual, and they may pay for it. It may come out of that insurance. But if you have no idea how much money that person had, then you are not going to be able to use that insurance. For me, I was not able to use the insurance. The funeral service place wanted the money up front, and also the cemetery place wanted the money up front. So therefore, we had to come out of pocket. So it may vary from person to person and state to state.
Thank you. The next question is location.
So you want to make sure that if you know your loved one is going to die, where are you going to bury them? You need to find that out. Did they put that in their will? Did they have, what religion were they? Did they have it set up? You want to make sure you know where they're going to be buried, because if they worship at a certain place, then you want to make sure that all that is taken care of in advance.
Okay. Burial/cremation.
Burial, you want to make sure that the person, did they want to be buried? Not everybody wants to be buried. There are some people who want to be cremated because cremation is cheaper. Burial can cost somewhere in between up to $5,000 to $10,000 or more, depending on where you live and the state. As far as cremation is concerned, you're going to have to, if you have siblings, in some states, not all, but here in the state where I live, in order for me to cremate my loved one, I had to have my sibling's signature. It's law, and it came into law, I believe, in 2016. And since I didn't know where everybody lived at, I went and buried my mother. Also, when it comes to burying, you want to make sure, some people may ask, can I embalm the person? Not every funeral services will say, okay, we can't embalm the person. But depending on religious beliefs, some people may do not want their loved one to be embalmed, and most funeral services, you need to check with them first and when it comes to embalming. Okay. Also, I want to indicate one more thing, donation. Some people may consider this a little maybe disrespectful for their loved one, but it's not, because your loved one has no idea. Donation of your body to science. It's something that you can give. You can call these people in advance, and what they would do is basically they will be aware of it. They will pick up the body. They will use that person's body for science. They will, when they're finished using it, sometimes it's 6 months to a year, depending on how long they want to use that body. They will cremate that person. They will give back those ashes to you if you want, and it usually takes somewhere between 3 to 5 weeks or 6. And they will give those ashes back to you, and they will also plant a tree in that loved one's honor.
And this brings me to a question or a thought, and I don't know if we've done the research on it, but also, as you mentioned, donating the body to science, it makes me think about organ donorship. Do you know anything about that, or is this something that we may have to include in the next video?
No, I do know something about that because I did do the research. Now, if you're going to donate your body, you cannot donate your body if there are organs missing. It has to be whole body donation. Donation is separate. Organ donation is separate from donating the body, and the body has to be whole. Also, not every body is accepted, so you would have to check with the services. Will ask you, or they will tell you and let you know whether that person's body is accepted or not accepted.
Well, but my question was more concerning just organ donation. What's the process if a person is donating just the organs? So I guess we can touch on that maybe in the next video, because there is a separate process for organ donation and that whole body donation. So we'll include that in the next video. Our next question, caskets and urns.
Okay, caskets, they can run somewhere between $1,000 or more, depending on what you want as far as burying your loved one. An urn can run somewhere between $100 or more, depending on where you live. State to state is different. Also, if you don't want to get an expensive urn, you can always donate. You can always get a can that's airtight, and you can go to some place like Burlington, or you can go to Walmart. They have urns there as well. They are less expensive and less money that you don't have to spend. And as far as caskets, which we're going to touch on next, you want to be careful of getting a casket, especially online, because there are scammers out there.
Alright, so let's jump into that. Buying or renting a casket.
Yes. I did not know that you could rent a casket. I never even heard of it. But a lot of people may know this. You can rent a casket. So buying a casket, you're buying a casket because you want to bury your loved one. And as I said before, the price varies from different places, from state to state. Basically a urn, you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can either buy an expensive urn, or you can get one that's inexpensively at Walmart or Burlington, or either you can just get an airtight can and bury your loved one. Now, if you don't have the funds to buy a casket, you can rent a casket. What this entails is you're renting a casket from the funeral services place, and what they would do is they let that person rent that casket for viewing of the body, and then once the body never touches the casket, once they, from the standpoint of laying the body in the casket, it's covered and protected. So once that person is laid to rest, and once that person has been in the casket, the family members will view the body. Once they're finished viewing the body, the people at the funeral services places, they would take that casket back, and then they'll place the person's body in a wooden box, and then they will be laid to rest.
So how much does renting the casket cost? What's the range?
Unfortunately, renting can be from place to place. It varies. It can be maybe as low as $1,000, or it could be more. So that depends on where you're going, and you would have to check with the funeral services place to ask them that.
Okay, now next we have if burying your loved one.
If burying your loved one, you need to have clothing on hand. You want to pick out some clothing in advance, get something out of their closet, and that they may have liked and just buried them in their article of clothing. It's unnecessary to go out and buy something brand new for someone that's going to die. You are burying them in the ground. They have no idea. So if you're going to cremate a person, though, however, you don't need any clothes at all. That person will be in a gown. You just viewing their body, and once you're finished viewing the body, the cremation would start, and I believe they cremate them without any clothing.
Okay, now the question is date.
So once you know your loved one is going to die, as far as the date is concerned, you need to set up everything. You need to have a place where you're going to have who's going to do the services, who's going to perform it. Just have, if you have a time frame of when your loved one's going to die, like for instance, my mother was going to be, I was told that she would die within 3 weeks. You want to make sure you have everything in place, set up. You have someone to perform the service. You know where the service is going to be, because there are places who rent and the fees are expensive, and sometimes it may take longer than you think. So you want to make sure that you get yourself ready and prepared to put the date on the obituary.
And the last question that we have is what some people call a comfort meal, and I believe others call it a repast. What do we know about this?
Comfort meal and repast to me are the same. It's just a meal that people have in honor of their loved one, or to talk about their loved one, just to communicate with one another. You don't have to have a comfort meal, and you don't have to have a repast. If you're not going to have a comfort meal or a repast, you need to state that on the obituary so no one is expecting it. And you need to do that in advance once your loved one has died. But if you do want a comfort meal or you want to do repast, you might want to pull your friends, loved ones, and see if they can help with the meal. Get a place or location where you're going to have this comfort meal or this repast.
Yes, and some people even have the repast or the comfort meal in private homes. And as you said, some people rent a facility for it depending on the amount. And in recent times, we have seen that some people have not even had comfort meals and repasts. So thank you very much for this information. Hopefully this information will be very useful for you, the YouTube viewing audience. And if you have any suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below, and we will include that. And next we will have part 3 after your loved one has died.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for answering our questions.
You're welcome.